I met my wife through online dating, and I'm very grateful to consider myself one of the success stories. I'd used several apps off and on for about 6 months when I met her, and throughout that time I had a handful of good and bad experiences. I only had one really bad encounter, which unfortunately was downright terrifying. It happened about 2 weeks before I met my wife, actually. I'd been messaging this girl Pamela for a few nights, and we decided to finally meet up. There was this park next to a couple of bars I'd been to before, which didn't seem sketchy, and we agreed to meet up there and then walk over. We met right around 8, and I quickly realized that Pam wasn't all there. Not that I try to judge people or put anyone down, but I knew this date wasn't going anywhere. We ended up having a conversation, or at least trying to have one, for maybe 30 minutes at one of the picnic tables. I was debating whether to hit up at least one bar or try to cut things short when Pamela said something that caught me completely off guard. She said there was a surprise in one of the bathroom stalls in the women's restroom. I laughed at first, thinking it was some awkward joke or maybe an attempt to flirt in a weird way. A surprise? Like what? A hidden candy bar or something? I asked earnestly, trying to play it off lightly. But Pamela just stared at me with this blank expression, her eyes wide and unblinking, like she was looking through me rather than at me. "No," she said flatly. "It's for you. You have to go see it. Third stall from the left." I don't know why, but something about the way she said that sent a chill up my spine. There was no humor, no playfulness, just this eerie certainty. The park's restrooms were in a small brick building about 50 yards away, dimly lit by a single flickering bulb over the entrances. One side was for men, the other for women. It was getting dark, and the park was mostly empty now, just a few joggers wrapping up their runs and some distant laughter from the bars. I glanced over at the building, feeling uneasy. "Why the women's restroom?" I asked, forcing a smile. "And why me? That's kinda creepy, Pam." She didn't respond right away. Instead, she pulled out her phone and started typing something, her fingers moving quickly. Then she looked up and said, "Because it's waiting for you. Go now, before it gets mad." That did it. I stood up, mumbling some excuse about needing to use the bathroom anyway, but really, I just wanted to get away from her and end this nightmare of a date. I figured I'd duck into the men's side, splash some water on my face, and then bail, tell her I wasn't feeling well or something. As I walked toward the building, I could feel her eyes on my back. The air felt heavier and colder too, even though it was a mild evening. I pushed open the men's door, relieved to find it empty. The place smelled like pee and cheap cleaner, with graffiti scrawled on the walls. I locked myself in a stall, sat on the edge of the toilet, and pulled out my phone to text a friend for an extraction plan. But as I was typing, I heard a faint scratching sound. At first I thought it was coming from the pipes, or maybe a mouse in the walls, but it was too rhythmic and deliberate, like nails dragging across metal. I froze, listening. It was coming from the other side of the wall, the shared wall with the women's restroom. Scratch, scratch, pause, and then another scratch. My heart started pounding. Was someone over there? Was it Pamela? But she was still at the picnic table. I could see her silhouette through the small window if I stood on my toes. And it didn't look like she had moved. Then the scratching stopped, and I heard a whisper. It was so soft, I almost thought I imagined it at first. "Come, see, the surprise." I bolted out of the stall, washing my hands quickly, and stepped outside, my skin crawling. Now Pamela was gone from the table. I scanned the park, but there was no sign of her. Relieved but rattled, I started walking toward the bars, figuring I'd grab a drink to calm down and call it a night. But as I passed the women's restroom doors, something made me stop. Curiosity? Stupidity? I don't even know. The door was slightly ajar, and that scratching sound started again, louder this time. Against every instinct, I pushed the door open a crack and called out, "Hello? Anyone in there?" There was just silence. The lights inside were off, but the flickering bulb from outside cast long shadows across the tiled floor. I flipped the switch, but nothing turned on. The bulb must have burned out. Using my phone's flashlight, I stepped in, telling myself I'd just glance around and then leave. There were 4 stalls, doors all closed except the third one from the left, which was cracked open. My mouth went dry, and I approached slowly, the beam shaking in my hand. The scratching had stopped, but now there was a low humming, like someone murmuring under their breath. I pushed the stall door open. At first, I didn't understand what I was seeing. Scrawled on the inside of the door in what looked like fresh red marker, or lipstick, were dozens of names, dates, and messages. But they weren't random graffiti. They were profiles. Online dating profiles. Mine was there, right in the center, with my photo printed out and taped up, my bio copied word for word. And below it, he's next. Surprise. I stumbled back, heart racing, and that's when I noticed the floor. Tiny scratches everywhere, like claw marks leading under the partition to the next stall. I turned my light that way and saw feet. Pale, bare feet, toes curled unnaturally, as if whoever, or whatever, was in there was standing on tiptoes. The humming turned into a giggle, high-pitched and childlike, but wrong somehow, echoing off the walls. I ran. I didn't look back once, and I didn't stop until I was in the crowded bar surrounded by people. I blocked Pamela on the app that night and deleted my profile for a week. When I finally logged back in, thank God that's when I matched with my wife. But sometimes, late at night, I still hear that scratching in my dreams. And I wonder if that thing in the stall ever found its next surprise. I think it's a law that every high school has at least one shady guy's bathroom, and at my school, it was the one in the basement. I'm not even kidding. It was like something out of a horror movie. The school basement wasn't that big, just 2 classrooms and a guys and girls restroom, but the lights were really dim and there weren't even classes down there. The rooms were used for storage, and I think only the janitors went down there regularly. Halfway through my sophomore year, after 2 kids caught doing something bad down there, the whole basement was made off limits. There wasn't an actual door leading down there, it was just a staircase, but the school put those dividers like you'd see in movie theaters, and teachers would try to catch anyone ducking underneath them. The rumors started right after that lockdown. Kids whispered that those 2 guys who'd been busted weren't just smoking or whatever. They'd seen something down there that freaked them out so bad they confessed everything to the principal just to get out. One of them transferred schools a week later, and the other stopped talking altogether, like he'd gone mute. Naturally, that only made the basement more tempting. My friends and I were the typical dumb sophomores, daring each other to sneak past the barriers during lunch or after school. Most of the time it was nothing, just dusty boxes in the old classrooms and that musty smell of old paper and mildew. But the bathrooms, we avoided those at first. They were pitch black if the lights weren't on, and the switches were inside, so you'd have to feel your way in the dark. One Friday after classes, my buddy Alex bet me $20 I wouldn't go into the guy's restroom alone and stay in there for 5 minutes. It was stupid, but I was also broke and trying to act tough. The school was emptying out, clubs wrapping up, so I figured it was safe enough. I ducked under the divider, crept down the creaky stairs, and pushed open the restroom door. The air hit me like a wall, cold, damp, and with a faint metallic tang, like rust or blood. I fumbled for the light switch, and when the fluorescent bulbs buzzed on, they flickered like they were about to die, casting everything in this sickly yellow glow. There were 3 stalls, all with doors half hanging off their hinges, graffiti everywhere, names, dates, and crude drawings. Nothing out of the ordinary for a school bathroom. I picked the middle stall, figuring it was as good as any, and locked the door. Or at least, I tried to, the latch was busted. I sat on the edge of the toilet seat, starting a timer on my phone. The first minute was boring, and I scrolled through memes to kill time. But that's when I heard it, a soft drip, like a faucet leaking, but none of the sinks were running. I glanced around, but the stall was empty. It seemed like it was coming from below, maybe the pipes. I ignored it, but then my phone vibrated. Not a notification, but like it was glitching out. The screen flickered. For a split second, the timer jumped from 147 to 459. I shook it off as a low battery thing, even though it was at like 80%. At around 3 minutes, the dripping stopped, replaced by a faint scratching, like chalk on a blackboard. It was coming from the wall behind me, the one shared with the storage room next door. I pressed my ear against the tile, cold and grimy, and listened. Scratch, pause, scratch. Then a whisper, so quiet I thought it was my imagination. Help me. My heart skipped. Was someone trapped? One of the janitors? I banged on the wall. Hello, you okay in there? No answer, just more scratching, faster now. I bolted out of the stall, ready to bail, but curiosity got me. The storage room door was unlocked, so I slipped in. It was crammed with old desks, filing cabinets, and stacks of yellow textbooks. The scratching was louder here, coming from the far wall, the one backing the bathroom stalls. I moved some boxes and found a small vent grate at knee level, rusted and loose. The sound was definitely from behind it. Hey, if you're stuck, say something, I yelled. Silence. Then, a child's voice, clear as day. I'm in the stall, come back. I froze. That couldn't be right. I ran back to the bathroom, phone flashlight on now since the overhead lights had dimmed even more. The middle stall door was still ajar like I left it, but as I approached, I saw something I hadn't noticed before. Etched into the inside of the door, fresh-looking scratches forming words. "Don't leave me alone." My stomach dropped. I knew for a fact I hadn't seen that earlier. And below it, in smaller text, the words, "Look down." I did, and what I saw stopped me cold. In the toilet bowl, the water was rippling, like something had just disturbed it. Then, slowly, a small handprint appeared on the porcelain rim, as if an invisible child had gripped it to pull themselves up. The water bubbled, and I caught a reflection, not mine, but a pale face staring back, eyes wide and pleading, mouth opening in a silent scream. I didn't wait. I sprinted upstairs, heart pounding, and didn't stop until I was outside the school. Alex thought I was pranking him when I told him, but he never collected on that bet. The next week, the school sealed the basement staircase with a proper door and locks. Rumors died down, but I couldn't shake what I'd seen there. Months later, digging through old yearbooks in the library for a project, I found a clipping tucked in the back, a news article from 20 years ago. It was about a kid who went missing during a school event. He was last seen in the basement bathroom. They never found him, but witnesses said he was playing hide and seek, crawling into vents and pipes. The article ended with a quote from his mom. He hated being alone. I haven't been back to that school since graduation, but sometimes, when I'm in a public restroom, I hear that dripping again. And I never, ever look down. A few years ago, something happened that I still don't have an explanation for. I was driving a few hundred miles to go to this professional development conference, and at one point I stopped at a rest area. It was one of those huge, fancy modern ones, and low-key I really wanted to explore it. I also had to use the restroom and stretch my legs, and figured I'd get something from the vending machines, so there was literally no reason not to stop. This was around midnight, and the place was surprisingly empty for how nice it looked. Polished floors, bright LED lights, even a little atrium with fake plants. The men's restroom was spotless, like it had just been cleaned. Rows of sinks, urinals, and about a dozen stalls, all with those automatic flush sensors. I picked one toward the end, away from the entrance, for some privacy. As I locked the door and sat down, I noticed the usual graffiti scratched into the partition walls, phone numbers, dumb jokes, the standard stuff. But one caught my eye. If you can read this, count to 10 and look up. It was etched rather deeply, like with a key or a knife, and the letters were uneven, almost frantic. I chuckled to myself, knowing it was probably some bored trucker's idea of a prank. But I was alone and bored too, so why not? I counted silently, 1, 2, all the way up to 10. Then I tilted my head back and looked at the ceiling. Nothing. Just plain white tiles, a vent, and a sprinkler head. This was lame. I shook my head and went back to my business, pulling out my phone to check emails. But that's when I heard a faint click. It sounded like a latch engaging, but it wasn't from my door. Instead, it was from somewhere above me. I glanced up again, and my breath caught. One of the ceiling tiles had shifted slightly, maybe half an inch, revealing a thin sliver of darkness behind it. Had that been there before? I stood up slowly, pants still around my ankles, and stared. The tile wobbled, as if something was pressing against it from the other side. Then, a soft scraping sound, like fabric on metal. My mind raced. Was that a maintenance access? Maybe an animal was up there? But I highly doubted this rest area had a critter infestation. It seemed too clean. Somehow, curiosity overrode my common sense. I reached up on tiptoes, the ceiling was low enough, and nudged the tile with my fingertip. It lifted easily, too easily, and as it slid aside, a small object tumbled out, landing on the toilet seat with a clatter. It was a keychain, old and rusted, attached to a single key in a faded photo locket. I picked it up, heart pounding now. The locket popped open with a click, showing a grainy picture of a man who looked eerily like me. He had the same build, same haircut, even similar glasses. But it couldn't be me. The photo was yellowed, like from the 80s. "What the hell?" I muttered, turning it over. Engraved on the back was the text, "Don't look down." Too late. My eyes dropped instinctively to the floor. The tile under my feet felt off. It was warmer than the rest, and when I shifted my weight, it creaked. No, not creaked. It groaned, like hollow space underneath. I knelt down, ignoring how ridiculous I looked, and and pressed my ear to the cold floor. At first I heard nothing, but then a muffled thump, rhythmic, almost like a heartbeat. Or maybe footsteps? No, it was knocking. Someone knocking from below. This is when panic set in. I bolted upright, yanked up my pants, and tried the stall door. Locked. Not just latched. The handle wouldn't budge, like it was jammed from the outside. I rattled it and called out, "Hey, anyone out there?" There was silence, except for that knocking growing louder and faster. It was coming from right under the stall now, vibrating through the floor. I glanced at the keychain in my hand. The key! Maybe. I tried it in the door lock. It fit and turned with a grind, and then the door swung open. I burst out, scanning the empty restroom. There was no one there. Sinks were dry and mirrors were fog-free. But as I washed my hands, trying to calm down, I caught movement in the reflection. Not mine. In the stall I just left, visible in the mirror's angle, the floor tile was lifting. Slowly, like being pushed from below. Then pale fingers emerged, gripping the edge, long, dirt-caked nails. Then an arm, sleeved in tattered fabric. I didn't wait to see the rest. I ran out of there, keychain still clutched in my fist, straight to my car. I drove off without even getting those vending snacks. The conference went fine, but when I got home, I looked up the rest area online. Buried in some old forum threads were stories from years back, stories about workers finding hidden crawl spaces under the bathrooms during construction. They also mentioned old utility tunnels from when the site was a warehouse. There were even reports of transients going missing, last seen lingering around the stalls. One post even mentioned a keychain washing up in a drain, with a photo that matched the one I had. I stopped digging deeper and threw the keychain away that night. But sometimes, when I'm driving late and stop at a rest area, I feel that warmth under my feet again. And I wonder if whatever's down there is still knocking, waiting for someone else to look up. I graduated from college a few years ago, and though this wasn't directly related to my major, I did get to use a 3D printer for one of my classes. The final for the class was basically us making a design with modeling software and printing it out. It couldn't be something super simple like a ball or a cube. For instance, there had to be at least 2 hinges or another type of movable joint. I decided to make a model of a bathroom stall, since the flat panels seemed like they'd be pretty easy to create. I spent a couple of weeks tweaking the design in Blender, adding a swinging door with hinges, a little latch that could actually click shut, and even tiny details like graffiti on the walls and a toilet bowl for realism. The professor loved the concept, and said it showed attention to scale and mechanics. Printing took about 8 hours in the lab's filament printer, and when it was done, it came out perfect, about the size of a shoebox, all in gray PLA plastic. The door swung smoothly, and the latch worked like a charm. I got an A on the project and brought the model home as a quirky keepsake, setting it on my desk next to my computer. That first night, however, I noticed something off while I was scrolling through my phone in bed. From across the room, under the dim glow of my desk lamp, the stall door looked ajar. I could have sworn I'd left it closed. I got up, nudged it shut with my finger, and heard that satisfying click. It was probably just vibrations from the street outside, I thought. But the next morning, it was open again, wider this time, like it had been pushed from the inside. I decided to examine it closely, and saw no cracks and no loose parts. It struck me as odd, but maybe the plastic was warping from temperature changes. However, over the next few days, it only got stranger. I'd hear faint sounds at night, like a distant creak or scrape, always when I was half asleep. One evening, while working late, I glanced over and saw the door moving, slowly inching open on its own. My heart jumped. I stared, frozen, as it swung to about 45 degrees, and then stopped. There was no draft in the room, and no other explanation. I closed it again, this time wedging a pencil against it to keep it shut. When I woke up, the pencil was on the floor, and the door was cracked open just a sliver. Curiosity turned to unease. I started inspecting the model more obsessively, shining my phone flashlight inside. That's when I spotted it. Etched into the tiny stall wall, and what looked like microscopic scratches, was a message, "Let me out." I knew for a fact I hadn't put that into my design. I hadn't added any text beyond some fake graffiti scribbles. I grabbed the magnifying glass from my drawer and peered closer. The scratches were uneven, like done with a needle or claw, and below it was writing saying, "I'm watching." I laughed it off, knowing this had to be a prank. Maybe it's from the person who accessed the lab printer right after me. But that night, the sounds escalated. They weren't just creaks anymore, but a soft tapping, like fingers on plastic. It was coming from the model. I sat up in bed, staring at my desk in the dark. The tapping stopped when I turned on the light, but the door was open again, wide open. And inside, under the flashlight beam, I saw a movement, a shadow flickering across the tiny toilet, too quick to be a trick of the light. Panicking, I grabbed the model and took it to the kitchen, intending to smash it with a hammer. But as I set it on the counter, the latch clicked shut on its own. Then, the tapping resumed, louder and rhythmic. I leaned in, ear close, and heard breathing. Shallow, raspy breaths, like someone or something trapped inside. My skin crawled. I raised the hammer, but before I could swing, my phone buzzed on the desk in the other room. It was a notification from the modeling software app. File updated. I hadn't touched it. I rushed back and opened the app. My design file had indeed been modified, timestamped just minutes ago. The stall now had a new addition, a tiny figure, humanoid, curled up in the corner. Its proportions were off, limbs too long, and face blurred like a glitch. As I zoomed in, the app crashed, and my computer screen flickered to a blue error. When it rebooted, the file was corrupted, but the model on the counter, the door was open again, and the figure was there. It was real, molded into plastic, as if it had printed itself. I don't know how, but I think something got into the printer that day. Maybe a virus in the software, or worse. Maybe it was something digital that crossed over. I destroyed the model that night, melting it down in my oven until it was a puddle of plastic. But sometimes, when I'm in a public restroom, I hear that tapping from an empty stall. And I wonder if it's still out there, rebuilding itself one layer at a time. I dated this woman named Stacy for almost 6 months, and in the beginning, the relationship was pretty much perfect. Looking back now, I can't even identify any warning signs. Or maybe just one. Stacy had a weird obsession with bathroom stalls. The reason I know that is because she insisted on inspecting the men's restroom with me on one of our dates. This was at a movie theater late at night after the film let out, and there was almost no one else there, so I got excited she wanted to fool around a little. But that wasn't the case. Instead, she dragged me in there, giggling like it was some inside joke, and started examining the stalls one by one. Not casually, mind you. She got down on her knees, running her fingers along the partitions, peering under the doors, even sniffing the air like she was checking for a specific scent. "This one's clean," she'd say, or "No, not this one." After a minute or two, I asked what she was looking for, and she just smiled mysteriously, saying, "Echoes, you'll see." We left without anything happening, and I brushed it off as quirky. Maybe she had OCD or a germ thing. But as the weeks went on, it became a pattern. Every date, she'd find an excuse to check out a public restroom. Restaurants, malls, even a gas station once. It was always the men's too, always with me tagging along, confused but going with it because everything else about her was great. One night, after dinner at this Italian place, she got that look again. The restroom was empty, tiled and faded blue, with those old school stalls that had gaps at the bottom. She picked the end one, closed the door behind us, me standing awkwardly outside it, and I heard her whispering. It wasn't to me, but instead like she was talking to someone else. "Is it you? Show me." Then a pause, and her voice brighter. "There." When she emerged, she was holding a small scrap of paper torn from somewhere with faded writing on it. Stacy wouldn't let me see it. Said she just tucked it into her purse and said we could go home now. This is about the time things started to escalate. At her apartment, I noticed sketches everywhere, detailed drawings of bathroom stalls, some with shadows in the corners or faint outlines of figures. Stacy said it was a hobby, capturing the architecture. But one evening, while she was in the shower, I snooped in her nightstand and found a journal. There were pages upon pages filled with entries about the echoes in the stalls. There were also descriptions of voices she heard, pleading or laughing, always from behind the doors. Dates and locations matched our outings, and the last entry read, "He's the key. Tonight, we'll listen together." That freaked me out enough to confront her. We argued, but she calmed down, apologizing, and saying it was from a rough childhood. Her dad had apparently locked her in a bathroom as punishment, and now she was reclaiming the spaces. It sounded plausible, maybe even healthy in a way. Stacy promised to tone it down, and for a couple weeks, things more or less normalized. Then came our 6-month anniversary. Stacy planned a surprise, a drive to an abandoned amusement park on the outskirts of town, one of those places shuttered in the 90s but not fully demolished. "Trust me," she said, leading me through the overgrown paths to the old restroom building, its sign barely readable. The place was a relic, rusted sinks, broken mirrors, and stalls with doors hanging crooked. There were no lights on, so we used our phone flashlights. Stacy beelined for the middle stall, her excitement palpable. "This is it, the original." She pushed me inside gently, saying, "Close your eyes and listen." I had no idea what was going on, but I decided to humor her, shutting the door and latching it. At first there was just silence, but then I heard a faint echo, like my own breathing bouncing back wrong, deeper and slower. I opened my eyes, and the stall felt smaller. The walls pressed in, or maybe it was my imagination. But when I looked down, the floor was covered in scraps of paper, just like the one she'd found before. This time there were hundreds of them, with handwriting that matched her journal, names, dates, and pleas like "let me out" and "don't listen." I tried the latch, but it was stuck tight. "Stacy, this isn't funny." There was no answer. Then the echoes grew louder, morphing into whispers, overlapping voices murmuring my name, her name, and secrets I never told anyone. My phone light flickered, and in the beam, I saw our sketches etched into the walls now, alive somehow, the shadows moving. One figure reached out, its hand brushing mine. It felt cold and real. I pounded on the door, screaming for Stacy. Finally it burst open, and I tumbled out, catching my breath. When I did, the building was empty, and Stacy was gone. I searched the park and kept calling her phone, but it always went straight to voicemail. I drove home in a panic and reported her missing the next day. The cops found her car at the park, but no trace of her. Weeks later, digging online, I uncovered old news articles about the amusement park. There were apparently a string of disappearances in the 80s, all linked to that very restroom. Victims were last seen entering stalls, witnesses hearing echoes before they vanished. One survivor even described a woman luring them in, a woman who matched Stacy's description, down to the sketches. But those articles were all from 40 years ago. Eventually I knew I had to move on. I deleted her photos and threw out her things. But last month, in a random coffee shop restroom, I heard it again, that echo whispering my name. And on the stall wall, there were fresh scratches. "Come back, we're waiting." I decided to take a break from dating for a while, and I never closed the door completely anymore.